Alright, so I just got back from the ironing board from pressing all of my seams open, and I also pressed, make sure the camera didn't move since I bumped it. I also pressed this, the Peter Pan collar, flat a little bit, and I'm a little concerned that I might have some rolling of this undercollar to the front. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to go in and do a little bit of understitching, because that's what we really should do. Even though it's fairly small and difficult, that's the right thing to do. So what you need to do is we need to open it up. So here's my opening, and we need to open it up. And what we need to do is we need to put a row of stitching on the undercollar, so the side that has our interfacing fuse to it, and we need to put a row of stitching just towards the inside of the seam on the undercollar side. So make sure that when you're stitching, that you are stitching on the undercollar that has the interfacing fuse to it, okay? And from the inside view, we want to make sure that all of our seam allowances are pressed and facing like they're pressed in the direction of our undercollar, so of that side of the collar that has the interfacing on it. And in order to sew this, we actually kind of have to turn the sample inside out so that we have a flat surface to work on. So I'm going to, this is my curved part, I'm going to reach inside, and I'm using my fingers to feel where the seam allowances are, and I'm pushing them over to the undercollar side, and then what I want to do is I want to push it forward. And I'm not going to start the understitching line all the way at the top of the curve. It's going to be, I'm going to start it like right at the bottom of the curve here, because that's where I can like physically get my sewing machine in there. If you want to, you can try to sew all the way around. It's probably going to be possible, it might just be difficult. So I want to make sure that you guys try to do this understitching line wherever it is. So again, just to kind of show you again, here's the front part of the curved collar, putting my fingers inside the collar here. I'm pushing those seam allowances towards the undercollar, and then I'm going to push this through, and I'm going to scoop this underneath of my presser foot. And this is going to be very difficult to see on the video, or very difficult to see in person, because you as the sewer or the constructor is really the only person that can see kind of down into this hole. So I want to scoop underneath of this, and I'm just going to be doing a row of stitching right along the inside of that seam, but I need to make sure that my fabric is laid as flat as possible. So I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch inward towards this, inward from that seam, the outer edge of that seam of the collar, onto my undercollar. And I'm making sure that my seam allowances are all pressed over. And I'm just going to do a very quick back tack. And I'm going to sew just like as much as I can until like my sewing machine is just like telling me it's not going to happen because the space is just becoming too small. Again, just make sure that that seam is opened up and everything is laying really as flat as possible down in there. Alright, I think I'm kind of getting to that point where everything's kind of getting a little bunched up in there, so I'm going to just do a couple more stitches, do a quick back tack, and pull that sample out. And trim those thread tails. Now what this understitching does is it helps to control the moving of the actual undercollar, or really the underside of anything that does any sort of understitching. So as you can see, this is the undercollar here. Oh, I forgot to turn this thread tail. And this row of understitching is only visible from the undercollar, which we really won't see it. And what it's going to do is it's going to prevent from moving and from this when moving occurs from this undercollar kind of creeping up towards the top, because that's what we don't want. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our bodice, and we're going to just make sure that you have, here's our bodice that we have seamed together. All the front part is facing us. And we can see that this is the front part of our collar here, because this is the part that dips down into the front. And I'm just going to flip it open and lay it flat. And then what we need to do is we need to identify that notch in our Peter Pan collar. And I'm going to line up that notch just square with that shoulder seam. And I'm going to put a pin in there. I'm going to make sure that this part of the front part of this collar matches the curvature of the bodice. I'm going to put a pin in there, and then I'm going to pick it up in my hand, and I'm going to just make sure that all of my raw edges along this front part of my bodice and front part of my collar all match up. Now, if we were doing the left side of this bodice, we would first be crossing over the front parts of our collar here before we pin them down, and this would be mirrored, and it would have been placed on the fold. But since we're only doing a half, this is what we're going to do. And then when we get over to the back part of our collar, this closed edge should line up with that 5/8 inch snip marking that we had lined up. It's not going to be flat because the Peter Pan collar is shaped in a way that it actually kind of splits. It splits in the back. It doesn't lay flat with the center back opening. So I put my pins in there. Now here's probably going to be the part that blows your mind a little bit. We're going to take the facing piece and we're going to go ahead and place that now right on top of everything that we've done. So what you need to do is you need to kind of turn this sample over to make sure that we have our seam lines matched up. Try to get all of our seam allowances matched up the best that we can. Mine aren't matching up perfectly, but it's matching up fairly close. And then what I want to do now is I want to come back in and put some more pins in and make sure that, like on this underside of the bodice, that those seam allowances from your shoulder seam are laying flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure everything is laying as flat as I can. Put in some pins. I feel like I have something that's not laying flat. Let me flip that over. It might be this piece here. Yep. There's a little bit of a pucker on the underside, so let's make sure that everything's laying flat here. And you can feel with your fingers on the top and your fingers on the bottom to make sure that everything is truly laying flat. Alright, and I'm just going to pin these together on the end, but I'm going to stop when I stitch. I'm going to stop right where that snip point was. That's 5/8 inch in from that open edge. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to line up my facing unit front with my bodice and Peter Pan collar front and just put some pins in, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, this is the most pins I've ever seen, and it is quite a few. And that's because we're going to be sewing through quite a few layers here. And so we want to try to make sure that this center front is matched up, and again, you know, if we were making a full bodice, this piece would be shaped more like a U, because all of these items would have been placed on a fold, so they would be mirrored and be completely full. So what we want to do is we now want to stitch this, stitch all of these layers together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So again, we want to run this raw edge of the fabric right along the inside edge of our presser foot, and I'm going to start at that 5/8 inch marking inward from my center back seam. So it's right where I put that pin at, and hopefully you have a notch there. So again, my raw edge is lined up with my presser foot. I'm going to go ahead and just lower my needle in, and I'm going to do a quick back tack. I'll take my pin out because I got a lot of pins going on here. quick back tack, and I'm just slowly going around this corner because I'm going through quite a few layers. And when I get to a pin, I'm going to stop and pull that pin out. Okay, and when I do need to stop, if I need to raise up that presser foot at all, I just want to make sure that my needle is staying in that down position. A couple pins out too. Ooh, bend my needle up. Just going slowly around this corner. Control, trying to keep that raw edge lined up with that inside edge of my presser foot. Take these last two pins out. And when I get to the end here, I'm going to do some back tacking and say hurrah. Alright, I'm going to trim my thread tails up. And I'm sure you can probably guess what we're going to be doing next, because we do have quite a bit of bulk in here, is that we need to trim, grade, clip, and notch. And so I'm going to skip the trimming area because you know, we already have it down to a 1/4 inch. If we were working with a 5/8 inch seam allowance here, we definitely want to make sure that we were taking it down. We were trimming to a 1/4 inch, and then we want to grade probably down to an 1/8. So I'm coming back in here, and I'm removing about an 1/8 of an inch from my facing piece only. And I'm going to trim that all the way down to the edge. So I've graded that at multiple different layers here. Now what you can probably see is that we have our bodice layer, then we have our 2 layers of collar, and then we have our facing layer. So we have quite a bit going on here. So what we now need to do is we need to notch out fabric. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to start taking out some triangles of fabric in here, because we've got quite a bit of bulk going on. I feel like my little scissors are getting a workout tonight. And especially right there in the where all those seams meet, right at the shoulder, come in and give that a good clip out. Give it a wide V. I'm going to just notch that in the front, get some of those bulk fabric out, and this is just going to really help us to have a nice flat collar that lays against the bodice. Okay, so then what we need to do is this facing piece will then get pressed to the inside. So I'm just going to flip that for the sake of you guys being able to see how all of this is going to be finished here in a moment. So you can see that all of this is coming to the inside. We have a nice collar here, and things are all finished on the inside. But what we need to do is we need to do that row of understitching again. So you want to make sure that that we have all of our seam allowances pressed towards the facing, okay? And I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and take the time to press this. Make sure that when you press, it might be a good idea to first press as it was stitched, and then see if you can get out the pressing hand and go ahead and press the seam open as best you can. It's going to be really thick. And then as it's laying flat, you want to make sure that all these seam allowances are pressed towards that facing piece, okay? So I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to do some pressing, and we can pick this up. And if you need help with this step, just because it is really thick, please ask me and I can help you to give you some pressing techniques.